Welcome to The Secret Witch Show, the podcast providing a safe and alchemical altar space of conversations which help powerful women escape a half-hearted, spiritless society and rediscover the freedom of living a wildly magical life. Every other week, we explore how to cast aside the wounds of shame, guilt, and fear connected with fully being yourself, so you can grant yourself permission to stop hiding, ground soulfully back into your body, illuminate your whole soul desires, tend your soul, rediscover and reclaim your powerful gifts, express your magic, and manifest your wildest alchemy. There's no better place to become who your heart longs to be. This is where we will guide you into liberation. I'm your host, Nicole Barton, and I'm so excited to dive in. Welcome to the latest show, Magical Ones. This is my favourite season of the year. It is witch season. It's autumn. The leaves are falling. They're orange. We've had Halloween. We've got bonfire night. And it is such a magical time. And of course, the season of the witch. So loving that. I have recently been feeling into what I'm going to be offering next year. And I can tell you it's going to be accessible, it's going to be exciting. So watch this space, but for now, I'm not going to share any more on that. What I would invite you to, if you are enjoying our show and you'd like to go deeper, I'd love for you to just join us in our gorgeous, free Secret Witch Sisterhood. It is such a magical space in there, and it's filled with gorgeous, like-minded, amazing magical souls just like you, who maybe feel a little bit fear about their magicalness. So if you're loving the vibe of this show, why not join us in there? On at the Secret Witch Show today, though, our guest is Maude Hirst. Maude is a meditation specialist, founder, speaker, coach, and author of the Intuitive Whispers Oracle deck, specialising in making meditation and its life-changing benefits accessible to all. Maude was an actress best known for playing Helga in the hit TV show Vikings, before becoming a leading wellness practitioner and founder of the bespoke meditation company EnergyRise. In this episode, we dived into the importance of connecting to our intuitive whispers in the journey of healing transformation, and how to deepen into our wisdom so we can embrace our true selves. Exploring Maude's personal journey of navigating darkness in her life, she highlighted the 4 stages of healing and how she journeyed from a career in acting where she felt disconnected to her spiritual awakening, and how she learned to trust her intuitive nudges to embrace who she truly is, and create an oracle deck that helps others access their own intuition. Listen to the end for our perfect card pull. Let's dive in. Hello, beautiful Maude. I am so excited to be here with you today to dive into our intuitive whispers and the wisdom that you've kind of channeled and downloaded was what I was kind of feeling from you, and made into something amazing with your oracle deck and just hearing your personal journey. So from Vikings to being a witch, which I think is quite interesting. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation and to dive into all things intuition.
Me too. So where I always like to begin is there's the kind of premise of the work that we do in this path is that women's stories are kind of so healing for other women, and almost like healing activations. And I believe that we're kind of all what I call archetypal remedies for others. So my first invitation is if you would like to share a little bit about your own journey with following your intuitive whispers and how that's helped you become who you really are, ultimately, which is what we're here to talk about. So if that feels good to you, let's start there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I, from a really young age, have always been super empathic. I could always read what other people thought, but I for kind of years didn't know what to do with that. So I channeled it in my kind of teenage years into acting and went to drama school. And I loved the idea of kind of getting under the skin of somebody else and really kind of being able to become other characters. And so I kind of channeled that, I suppose, that gift of deep empathy into kind of exploring in the acting world and performing. And so I did that really. I was auditioning from the age of 10 till I was in my late 20s. And then I filmed in Vikings, as you mentioned, playing Helga, who was kind of a spiritual being in her own right as well. But at that point, I hadn't done any kind of mindfulness practices, any kind of meditation, any kind of witchery. And then at the end of my 20s, I came out of the show. I went through a really awful breakup, had to sell my house really quickly. I kind of went through just the shedding of everything. I kind of went from thinking I had everything that I wanted and thinking that life is kind of falling into place to suddenly being in this kind of black abyss and being like, what is my life? And I was approaching my 30s. And I really kind of felt that I came up against these two choices at that point. Like the first being like, do I kind of sink into this dark period and just explore what's going on? Or is there an opportunity for me to kind of figure out a different path and be asking some different questions of myself? And I went to a yoga and meditation retreat to just do a little bit of like self digging. And it was in meditation on that retreat that I started to realize how kind of disconnected I'd been from myself and my intuition, and how although I was using my powers of empathy to channel something, it was very disconnected from myself. It was always about kind of getting in the character of somebody else and disengaging from myself. And meditation was really the first time that I felt and heard my own intuition and those like whispers from within being like, this is who you really are. This is what makes you happy. This is a direction that I think you should go. And I was really fascinated with exploring that a little bit further and kind of going deeper into the journey into myself, into kind of figuring out at that age, as I was approaching my 30s, who I wanted to be, what made me happy, was acting really what I wanted, who was I? So I kind of deep dived into meditation. I went and did a Vipassana 10-day silent meditation retreat, which was amazing and profound and terrifying in equal measure.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. And never thought I could be silent for 10 days either. So even that was a challenge within itself. But then also just sitting with your own thoughts, sitting with your own body for that long is quite an experience. But again, what came out of this was just like there is such wisdom in our own bodies. There is such like our intuitive whispers. And what I mean by our intuitive whispers is like that voice that you find within you when you spend enough time with yourself, was really powerful. And I'd kind of been ignoring it for so long. And I'd been very much a people pleaser. I'd been very much living a life of other people's expectations. And it was the first time that I found in those kind of deep practices that I had an own internal guidance that I could start to follow. And so that is when everything started to shift. And I really wanted to share the wisdom that I'd felt in these meditations and really wanted to teach people some tools and techniques that I'd learned that had really helped me. And so my business, EnergyRise, started to emerge, which was all about just sharing how to connect people back to themselves, what kind of tools we can listen to and to connect back to intuition, and using kind of healing practices and meditation practices, really just to show people and reflect their brilliance back to them, so that they could kind of trust that for themselves. And then that's kind of developed into discovering and creating my Intuitive Whispers Oracle deck. And kind of that's where we are, just exploring this deeper and deeper every day.
I love this. There's just so much juice here. Like, I don't even know where to begin. But I think where I do want to begin, that feels the juiciest piece. And I think you kind of spoke to it. I was kind of wondering this as I was reflecting on your journey. I was like, wow, this is a great example of like you being a woman who is like really successful actress. And yet there's almost like this, there's two things. There's almost like I wondered how far, like almost like playing the role of another character played into like that, almost like being a mask over who you really were. Because I think we all relate to that, like regardless of whether, you know, we're in Vikings or just like everyday humans living life, like we're almost having to fit ourselves into playing a role. So I think there's a whole exploration around that would be really juicy for our women. But I also had this sense of like when you said that you were playing this kind of spiritual character and that you'd never kind of, well, I don't know if you said this actually, but the way I heard it was like you hadn't really been that spiritual before playing that character. And it's almost like what I'm hearing, because this is how I worked with the witch as well, is like, it's almost like that maybe that character, and I'm curious, like, did that character almost like initiate you into this world of spirit and magic? Because I always think it's almost like a very archetypal. I work with archetypal remedies, and I see those characters and stories and personalities that have like a real medicine for us. So maybe let's stop there, because that feels like the juiciest piece. And I'd love to hear what you say to that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think Helga, my character, kind of planted some seeds in the research that I did into paganism, and that kind of
Mm,
the Vikings were they were so connected to the earth, and they had like nature was just a part of who they were, and they were, they had to listen to nature in order to kind of go on those huge voyages, and they were kind of so I think there was an element that I hadn't realized at the time. I think this is all kind of in retrospect, looking back, that
mm,
there must have been a few seeds that were planted there, absolutely, of like, wow, how disconnected I'd really been from all of that stuff. And
yeah.
I think in the West, we are very much taught that, like, once we get to this achievement in the external world, and once we've achieved this and done this, that we'll be happy. And actually, I was discovering that all of the achievements were not leading to happiness. They were leading to
Mm,
a kind of disconnect from myself. And so when I started unpicking this for myself, I think there was definitely some stuff that I had read and researched about the wisdom of history and the wisdom of
mm,
like where we'd come from, that we are disconnected to, which I think is such a shame. Um,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
which I think
I
is really
love that.
true.
I love that, because it's almost like your character kind of mirrored back to you an aspect of yourself that have been lost.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
love that.
definitely. And I know what the other piece that you were talking to in terms of like, was the becoming the character, a kind of hiding behind something else. And,
Mm,
we all, and I talk about this a lot, that I really feel that we do hide in any job that you do. Acting is just the kind of external representation of that. But we're all playing characters, and in different aspects of our lives, whether we're mothers or whether we're wives or whether we're sisters or whatever it is, like we kind of step into these roles, and actually sometimes it's a cover up of a hiding of the actual person that we are with beneath all of it. And one of the big things that I had to unpick, which I hope resonates with those that are listening, was just that we are much more than the identities of the things we are externally. And
mm,
actually, our identity can be so many things. Like, we could be somebody that does all these amazing things and can play all these different parts, but actually the essence of us is something much kind of bigger and greater than that underneath them.
That's so, so powerful. And I just love the kind of metaphor of acting, I guess, as like the way of seeing that and really getting clarity on that. That just feels so magical. Yeah, so I had Don Miguel Ruiz on as well, and he wrote a book called Actor. With Barbara Emrys, and they were talking about similar themes as well. I think it was them. Yeah. So yeah, I'm just always interested in how, because I see the witch as kind of one of those archetypal lenses, and again, the witch to me is like an archetypal mirror, much in the same way your character was. And I very much see that the witch in more than perhaps any other archetype can really feel tempted to hide parts of herself, and therefore she's also really good at like acting in many ways, because she's kind of learned this skill to like put on like, oh, I'm this person, to almost like fit in, so that she's not outcast. So that feels really resonant for our listeners. And yeah, gorgeous. Where else did I want to go? Because there's so much you said. Oh, I know. Yeah. What feels really juicy as well is you talked about how you kind of went through this period of what I would describe as darkness, I guess you could say. I think you talked about shedding and the black abyss, I think you called it. And I'm just wondering if you can speak to that a little bit in terms of like the initiation. I see it as like almost like an initiation into our true expression. And so I'm wondering if you can speak a bit to how that kind of process of going through that breakup kind of initiated you into your wisdom.
Yeah, it was I always feel like, I look back at those times and I'm really grateful for them, but the actual process of it during the time is hard, and none of us
Mm,
out of choice want to walk into the abyss and want to kind of sit in the darkness. But actually, like, I really believe in the kind of duality of life, that actually
mm,
within that darkness, suddenly the biggest specks of light, it's like the star. I love the metaphor that, stars appear from a black hole. So like the biggest brightness comes from like that explosion of darkness. And it was, yeah, it was a horrible, horrible time. But it was also this time of unraveling and a time of getting to know the parts of myself that I wasn't really brave enough to look at before. And I did lots of different practices in that time, meditation being one of them, a lot of body work. And I worked with a somatic therapist who was almost like massage and therapy at the same time. And loads of different kind of pathways into kind of rediscovering
Mm.
the kind of things that kept cropping up in my life. And although that relationship breakup was like the explosion that awakened me, I
Mm.
was actually recognizing that I was in lots of patterns of behaviors that weren't serving me, and that I was, going into lots of unhealthy relationships because I recognized my parents split up when I was a baby. And so until you have that healthy dynamic
Mm.
reflection of what relationships look like, you often do kind of recreate that same pattern. So for me, it was about kind of relearning myself, relearning healthy patterns, and through being brave enough to sit in that dark period, and kind of
Mm.
work through it, I think.
Yeah, I love that you said about being brave, because it really does feel to me like the darkness is like there's almost like no getting away from it if we want to truly heal. And what I'm hearing is that like deep level of courage that it took to be able to go into that kind of journey of self-illumination and going into the body as well and starting to kind of hear what was really there. And so I just think, yeah, it's something we so often avoid in our society because of the level of fear. And I'm wondering, I guess, if I was listening, I'd be wondering like how you opened your heart to that kind of that journey and that way of being, because there can be a lot of fear, can't there, that comes up when we're in that.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. We try and avoid anything that feels unknown and that feels fearful. And I certainly was like that as well. And even when I kind of started to find my own spiritual practice, I felt a lot more comfortable flying off to the stars and being like in that kind of beautiful, like meditative state that felt like expansive. And I didn't like sitting in the uncomfortable things. So I would say it wasn't a straightforward line for me, and it wasn't easy,
Yeah.
but it was about just like taking small steps and recognizing the spaces that I felt really safe to dive in and the people I felt really safe to kind of be in that space with, whether it was with my body therapist or whether it was in meditation, like a place where I started to learn, like, okay, I think the fear comes from what we fear that if we feel it, we're going to get stuck in it. And we
Yeah.
forget that, and what you realize when you do sit in it and what you do realize when you process it is that actually everything's much more fluid than that, and things are moving all the time. And so instead of this fear of like, oh, what if I feel that sadness? I don't want to just get stuck in the sadness of it. And so I wouldn't feel it and I would close it all down and be the girl that was always fine. And then I was brave enough to actually sit in the sadness, and I realized that it was a moving thing anyway, and it just needed to release itself by
Mm.
a big outburst of tears or something, and then I would feel a lot better. So I
Mm.
think that one way to kind of move through the fear is to remember that everything is moving, and it's not, you won't get stuck there. It's actually the best way to move through it is to kind of to go through it rather than avoid it and push it down.
I love that so much because, yeah, I do. I'm relating to that idea from, I hear lots of women talk about that fear of like, well, if I open this up, am I just going to be stuck here? So I love that. I love that point. And yeah, I imagine being on a silent retreat for as long as you were, there was kind of no avoiding that.
No,
So that in itself was courageous. I remember doing a silent day on retreat in Bali once, and that was hardcore enough.
but it is amazing what we're capable of when we push. Because
Yeah,
I didn't think like I jumped into the extreme because I was in that kind of unsettled place in my life. But yeah, we never think we can do the things that we really can do and we're capable for until we kind of
yeah,
jump into it.
yeah, that is so true. Um, if we're on the kind of topic of silence, I'd like to dive into a little bit. Are you then kind of channeled this almost like what I call like a point of view or a body of work that you say? I think there's like four, or I don't know whether you call them four steps, but there's like four parts to it. And I'm just wondering if we can dive into that a little bit, because I think what the first part of that speaks to is almost like the wisdom of the silence. I think you've referred to it as so, like that listening part. I'm just wondering if you can briefly overview like your what you channeled, and also I'm interested in like kind of how you channeled it as well, because I think you said it came to you through meditation, which is a great example almost of like just downloading that intuitive wisdom and like how that is so vital in the body of work and becoming a healer. And I don't know whether you kind of call yourself a healer, but for me, a healer is anybody who's here channeling things and bringing them through to help others. So yeah, that was a long thing there that I maybe didn't come up with an exact question, but I'm
I'm
good at
with you. I've
that.
got you. No, I'm following you fully. I love that. That's how my mind works as well. It's just like expansive all over the place. So I started thinking about how I work with people one-to-one, I work in big groups, but then I had the opportunity to create an oracle card deck. And I really wanted to find and sit with what is the process that I use. So much of the work I do has always been so intuitive. I feel a lot. Then it kind of just comes out my mouth without realizing it. And then to get this down on paper, I was like, I have to find the format of this and realize what journey I'm actually taking people in. So the way that I channeled it was to just sit in my own meditation and really ask, get clear on the question, being guide me through the message that I want to share, but also what these 4 stages, for me, it's the 4 stages of transformation, the 4 stages of healing. It was really quick. It was immediately, I just kind of saw this timeline of what I do in my own personal healing journey, and then also what I teach and what I share. So the 4 stages are, as you kind of said at the beginning, the first stage is about getting quiet and listening so that you can begin to tap into your internal voice and your intuition and I call them intuitive whispers. And I spoke to somebody the other day and they said, I do feel I'm connected to my intuition, but I don't feel I hear it as a whisper or words. I get a feeling. So what I mean by intuitive whispers, we might all experience that differently in our different kind of skill sets. I'm actually a kinesthetic feeler, so I don't necessarily hear words all the time. I kind of get a feeling in my body and just have a knowing. But other people see things, other people hear things, but all of that is your intuitive whispers. So the first section is how do we get quiet enough, switch off the world and the busyness that we're all kind of living in, and get quiet enough to actually hear that internal voice. Then when you've got quiet enough, when you started listening, you move into the second stage, which is all about clearing. And so what is it that's in the way of you living the lives that you want to live? And it might be some limiting beliefs are in the way, and some unhealthy behavioral patterns from your past that are stopping you. Let's use an example of somebody trying to find love, or somebody trying to find partnership in some way. And so then maybe what's in the way of that is an old behavioral pattern that's not helping them, or a belief that you're not properly lovable underneath, or there's something that you want to work through. So the clearing section is all about, now I'm connected to myself. What do I need to clear out the way in order to create the space for something new to arrive? So then you go through this process of clearing, of unraveling, what's been holding you back. And then once you've moved through that stage, you move into the third stage, which is about rebuilding and rebuilding yourself in a really conscious way. So with the wisdom of your intuition, with all of this understanding of what you've cleared out, now you have this space and being what do I really want? What makes me happy? What are the feelings that I want to feel more of? Which I think is really the key magic to becoming the person you want to become, because it's all about, how do I actually want to feel? What are these feelings in my body that I want to create? So you start rebuilding yourself in this conscious way, maybe bringing in daily practices or rituals or spells or magic or whatever it is that you work with. And then the last part is, with all of that wisdom, how do I take action and put this out in the world and become this person and become more of myself? And again, it's not about layering and pretending you're something. It's how do you unravel in order to become more of you? And so for me, that was then kind of what I really clearly saw through that meditation, was this 4-part journey of getting quiet, clearing space, rebuilding yourself, and then going to kind of become yourself in the world.
I love that so much. And I was just kind of, as you were speaking, I was relating that to different elements of the path that I serve as well. And it does feel like those are kind of the key themes, if you like. So yeah, I love all of that. And listening, for example, for me would be that creating space for the witch. And I think you talk a lot about meditation, and I can see why that would be really resonant with that first part of the path. And then there's self-illumination was kind of the second part that you're speaking to. And then the kind of embodiment and attuning to our hearts and all of that sort of thing. But I also particularly love what you said about action, because I think in a lot of kind of manifestation teachings, say, for example, we can kind of almost think we've got to, when we first start this journey, we can think, oh, we just got to make a wish and then that will happen. And we forget that there is also this kind of aligned action piece. But I think also we often, I love that it kind of came last, because we also have that process, I think, of really going into our hearts to know what actually is truly aligned. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that at all. If there's anything that you've got to say around that.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't what the like how to take action from that aligned place.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, how to know what is truly aligned. And I guess maybe it comes back to even going back into the listening.
Yeah, it's like the whole it's really spending enough time in each of these sections, I think, and to really get to know like what it is that your own body is saying rather than like what it is that we one of the things that comes up a lot with the people I work with is that we often have a dream when we're younger and we keep trying to kind of get to that dream we forget to kind of tune into where we are at this stage of life and what our dream is now, and to kind of really look at the intricacies of like where we are, what we want, what makes us happy. And I think one of the things about manifestation that you said as well that I find really interesting is that so often we focus on the external thing that we're trying to
Mm.
manifest. And instead, for me, the most important part of it is like the feeling of like what it is
Mm.
that you're actually trying to
Yes.
feel. Like if that thing arrived in your life, I again I'm going to use relationships. I don't know why that's just
Mm.
in my mind today, but the like one of the things I had to really work through was instead of being like, I want to meet somebody who has this kind of lifestyle and is this kind of look and like it was like what do I want to feel in that relationship? Like I want to
Mm.
feel safe. I want to feel completely like I can be myself. I want to feel the same love that I give them. I want to feel empathy from both sides. And when I started to kind of to work on the feelings rather than the external, and
Mhm.
then when you start taking action from that place, it's a very different ball game to doing it from a place that it's very like heady and this is what I
Yes.
want rather than like this is what I feel. It's a really different energy.
That's what I was just feeling into as you said that, actually, because there's always like this kind of sense of like feeling versus head, and like coming into the body, and I think that also ties back into like our intuition, doesn't it? Like how would you define us being able to know like what we're intuiting, I guess, and is it very much tied into feeling and sensation?
Yes, it is. And I always say when I get asked this question that it's intuition rather than thinking. Thinking always has a but and a why and a question or a, like
Mm.
it's there's always an and an ah when you're thinking. It's like, is that right for me or is that right for me? Like that's always mind. Your heart, your intuition always knows, and it's a very clear. It's like when you get that feeling, we don't always want to hear it, and it's not always the thing that we necessarily want, which is why sometimes we resist it and pop back into the head, but your intuition never doubts itself. And so
Mm.
whenever there's that for me it's a feeling of clarity within you, which is what I kind of define intuition as. And the mind is in it all of its brilliant things that it does. Like it's not great at following like it's meant to repeat patterns. It's meant to keep us safe. It's meant to like be something that kind of formats things. And the heart is all about feeling and all about like what is right for us. It's our, this is our body, our life experience. And so, yeah, for me, intuition is that like it's an inner feeling of like certainty within us that that's the right thing. And I think that's how you know the difference between thought and intuitive knowing.
Yeah, I love that. And I guess what was also coming up for me around that is going back to the fear. Because what can also I find happen, and it's probably where this becomes like a loop rather than just a linear thing, is like once we start to get in contact with those intuitive nudges or intuitive whispers, we can then often have fear. I think the example I'm thinking of is how women often who are resonating with being secret witches will kind of feel that intuitive nudge. They're like, I'm here to be a healer." Like they'll hear that and open to it, and it'll feel really good in their hearts. They're like, "Oh, this is juicy," and then all of a sudden, all the logical fear will come in and be like, "Well, you're going to fail. You're not good enough. Like, who do you think you are?" And people are going to judge you and think you're crazy. And so, what would you say when people have kind of got in tune with that intuitive whisper? How would you then kind of share with them to work with that fear of expressing? Because I think expressing was in kind of the part about rebuilding, was it?
Hmm.
Um, how would you then say that they work with that? So, especially if there's, say, like a fear of being that full expression of what they've discovered.
Yeah, and that can be really scary. And I think one of the fears that really comes up in that, and particularly when it is like uncovering a gift like that, is that you don't want to be rejected. And that there's a sense of like, am I going to fit in if I actually become this full witch of myself? But actually, what I would say to that is be really curious about what the fear is and get really clear and like intricate about what it is, because all of our fears are different. And sometimes we just kind of judge fear in as an emotion and we just kind of want to block it off and we go back into hiding. But instead, it's almost giving the fear space. And you might want to journal on it. You might want to talk to somebody else that you really trust about it. But when you recognize what your fear is connected to, that then kind of links back into, I mentioned about limiting beliefs in the clearing section, but we all have limiting beliefs. And there's normally one or two primary limiting beliefs that we have to kind of work through and clear. But normally it's the same things that crop up within us. So when you feel that fear, so you've like, you found your intuitive voice, you kind of recognize you've got a gift and you're a bit scared. Instead of pushing that fear away and being like, I'm just going to close that box, be intrigued with like, okay, what is the actual fear of? Am I afraid of feeling disconnected to people if I go down this route? Am I afraid of not being lovable? Am I afraid of not being good enough and of feeling like an imposter in this world? When you get clear and that clear on what it is, you can really work through that belief. Whereas if you just say I'm scared, it's very overwhelming and then it's like, I don't know where to start. And so you just close it down. But
Yeah.
from my experience, like the clearer you get on what that is, you have then a choice to kind of go and work on that belief. And then it will open it up again for you to kind
Yeah.
of take that next step into your witch journey.
Yeah, I love that. I always say it's like we think that we often arrive at being a healer because we've realized that we've had some healing ourselves, and then we get to the next, it's almost like the next level. It's like, okay, there's still some healing to do. And that's essentially how I see it. Whereas a lot of women will also feel like, oh, maybe I'm not cut out for this. And it's actually like, no, this is just, we're going back around the loop. We're going back
Yeah.
into the spaciousness and the self-illumination. So yeah, I love that.
And just want to add to that. So before we move on, but like when you're
Yeah.
just talking about the loop, how I see it as well and how I describe it is like an onion. So instead of feeling like you're caught in this endless loop, just like think every time you hit another wall of like fear, you're just going a little bit deeper into your onion. And like at the center of the
Yes.
onion is like your truth and who you really are and all your magic and all your power. But it's just like every time you kind of get confronted with another like restriction or another limitation, it's just your onion getting that like
Yeah.
another layer deeper and deeper and deeper. So kind of don't, I always say feel the fear and do it anyway. Just like keep going down your layers.
I love so much that you've used that analogy because one of the ancient wisdom bodies of my path is homeopathy. And we often use that onion analogy of like peeling back the layers to get back to the core of who we are. So I love that you've just used the analogy that I also use all the time. That just feels so magical. Yeah, I love that so much. And also it makes me think of how, that becoming a healer is probably just going to illuminate some of the same things that we've illuminated previously. I think you said like these kind of core wounds, I guess, like show up in different areas, and they're just here for us to love ourselves more deeply, so that we can return to that core of the onion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love
And
that.
also when you heal those parts of yourself, you start attracting the people that need healing in those areas, which is
Yes,
what I've realized. I know you
exactly.
said that at the beginning, that as women, a lot of our stories are actually so healing for each other. And I really believe that, like with the one-to-one sessions that I do, it's so interesting that most people that show up into my space without me even talking necessarily too much about my own journey
Mm,
often come up with the same themes that I've worked through myself. So it's
yes.
never be scared to look at that, because often that's exactly the people you're here to also help.
I love that so much because one of the things I talk about is how we are archetypal remedies for each other, but there's a universal principle. I don't know whether you're familiar with this, but there's a universal principle of healing called similia simila bus, which is what a lot of my work is based on. And what that means is like cures like. So essentially, exactly what you're talking to there is that as we fully express our remedy into the world, that's when we start to naturally attract people who are like us, because like cures like. So it's exactly that. Like, and yeah, I love that you bring that in, because I think so many women will be interested in that. Um, by the way, it's so funny that you keep mentioning. I think several times you said the word star, and I was really feeling into it as you were sharing your journey. I was like, oh, what remedy are you? And I think star is your remedy, like archetypal stellar, I would say, feels to be like your remedy in terms of the journey you've had. Like there's this just natural like brightness, and you shine your gifts naturally into the world. And but also there's that kind of like having kind of hidden well, not hidden, I guess you could say hidden, but that piece we talked about at the beginning about being a star but playing the role of someone else. And it feels like that's almost like the journey that you've been on and the medicine that you're here to share with the world. So yeah, I thought
Love
I'd just
that.
share that because
Yeah,
you keep
thank you.
mentioning star, and I was
Yeah.
like, that is her remedy.
Love that.
Yeah. Um, yes. And I'm wondering as well, as we were talking about the fear of embracing our witch, whether that was something that you journeyed with at all.
Yeah, hugely. I just even the whole like word of spirituality. I come from my mum raised me and my brother and my sister by herself, and my whole family are very academic, very kind of heady, very brainy, um, very atheist. Didn't really believe in anything other than like science and proof and reading and facts, and that was kind of how I was programmed as well. So when I started uncovering a lot of the stuff that I was feeling intuitively and a lot of like the magic of the stuff that you can't explain, and a lot of like the healing I work with, theta healing, which is, guiding people into that beautiful theta headspace and working with the energy of love. And like none of it makes logical sense, but the
Yeah.
feelings are so real. And so the physical healings I was having in my own body and going through some really like profound physical and emotional healing through this stuff. And I was like, I can't deny the experiences I'm having, but my brain was like rejecting and being like, this doesn't make
Mm.
sense. And I somehow need to make everybody around me understand this. And then I got to a point, so I really resisted for a while at the beginning. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to ever fit into my life with these
Mm.
two truths playing out. And then over time, I just recognized that I didn't have to prove anything. I didn't have to teach other
Mm.
people. I only needed to just keep experiencing my truth, and the people that would want to learn from that would show up, and the people in my life that weren't interested in it, that was also okay, and that's their truth, and that's what they live in. So there was an internal battle I definitely worked through for the first few years, and how much of
Mm.
it I wanted to share, how much of it I was like too afraid to share at first. And now I'm just like, I share everything. I'm an open book. Those that want it, take it. Those that don't, reject it. And that's okay.
I love that. I love that. And I guess you were doing that quite in front of the public as well to a degree. So that in itself is also kind of even more like additional layers of like of that. So yeah, that's really inspiring to for many women who are listening, I guess, to see that, it is okay to embrace our witch and it is safe and we're not gonna, be burned at the stake anymore. So yeah, I love that. Mm. One of the things that I was seeing that you did on your website, and I don't know if this is like a big thing for you or if there's a kind of anything you see around it, but you talked about meditation for ADHD. And a lot of the women who are listening to this, or whether they kind of identify with the label or they have had a diagnosis or not, like I often see there's a kind of link between neurodivergence and the witch. So I just wanted to touch on that and see if you had anything interesting to share around that. It might be
Yeah, I
completely
think
unrelated, but I just thought I'd ask.
no, it's always
Yeah.
great to put it out there. I think it's really interesting that this conversation is coming up so much around neurodiversity. I don't personally have ADHD. I have dyslexia,
Mhm.
but I work with a lot of people that do. And I worked with the reason I've put it on my website is because I started to recognize with the people I was working with ADHD and the people that were coming saying also that they had a super busy mind, that meditation is real. It can be a real struggle, but it's also something that people are prescribed to do that's really good for the busy mind. But also it's
Mm.
like it's almost like this internal battle when we spoke about earlier, sometimes that we set ourselves up for failure. And that's what a lot of people that I spoke to with ADHD were feeling, that they were told to do this thing, but then they tried to do it and they felt like they were failing because their mind was so busy and they were going in
Mm.
so many different directions that being in a like quiet space with a quiet mind just wasn't possible. So I was really fascinated around like looking at what are the different practices and techniques we can use to still enter that space for the people
Mm.
that really need it, but also couldn't access it. So I started to find methods of basically meeting yourself at the energy that you're at and doing a
Mm.
practice at that level to then bring yourself down rather than going straight from 100 to zero. So I do a
Mm.
lot of like really active breath work and getting people's nervous systems energized before then bringing them into stillness. And it really has started to help with this, like how to find your internal calm. And again, if we're talking about connecting people back to their intuition and their inner wisdom, how to find that and how to actually quiet away from all the crazy external distractions. And I really found that this is something that it's started to be so fascinating because we're all built so differently. And there's so many different pathways to finding our own inner space. So yeah, that's why it was
I
on there.
love that. I love that so much because I think, yeah, many women will relate to that, particularly who resonate with being the witch. There's just kind of I see there's a pattern. I'm autistic, so of course I'm looking for patterns. But yeah, I think there's such a link often between, I think, that deep sensitivity as well of neurodivergence and being a kind of a magical one, I guess you could say. So yeah, definitely people should check that out if they're resonating with that. That's really gorgeous. And that, I guess, another question is, like, if people are just kind of starting out on their journey into following their intuitive whispers, and I guess even starting to hear their intuitive whispers, like, are there any kind of practical things? We talked about meditation, so maybe that's one of them, but is there anything kind of practical that women can take away from listening to this?
Yes, a few different practices that kind of help connect to that. One thing that I love is like intuitive journaling. So you can, and I love doing it first thing in the morning when you're still kind of in your dreamlike state. If you have a like a notepad by your bed and just do like 3 pages of just unthought out writing and just kind of don't take your paper pen off the page. It's a really good way to start listening to what your intuition is trying to tell you without trying to think it.
Mm.
So that's like intuitive journaling, I think, is a really, really powerful practice to do. And also spending lots of time in nature, I think, without, and if you can digital detox while doing it and leave phones at home and get away from screens as much as you can, I think like it's in the silence that your intuition starts to speak. So any place and time that you can be with yourself without music playing, without the external distractions, is where you're giving your intuition an opportunity to speak to you in some way.
Mm.
So
I love that.
prioritizing silence and stillness is definitely important.
Yeah, I love that. And it's just quite illuminating, actually. So I guess when we think of silence, we think of the Vipassana retreat where we just go and lock ourselves away and don't speak to anybody and we just are completely in silence. But I guess there are other ways that are maybe more accessible than, than the full on experience of silence, that we can begin to work with that at home.
Yeah, definitely. And 5 minutes is, sometimes like things come straight away to you in a few minutes, but something I don't quite know what it is. I'm like trying to figure out the magic of really what's happening when we go into nature, because nature
Mm.
has just this incredible ability to bring ourselves back to us and to slow the nervous system down. I think it's that there's like a natural rhythm of nature that when you get out there, your heartbeat sinks into just something happens, and we all know it. You stand by the ocean and suddenly you're breathing deeper and you go into deep into the forest and the same thing happens. And so yeah, for me it's like if you do find a seated practice difficult, just have moments of yeah, turning off any device and getting yourself and immersing yourself in nature, because that I think is one of the most powerful places where your intuition starts speaking.
Mm. I love that. And that's just reminded me as well, we can so often think of meditation, even just being like sat down, like eyes closed, hands, and often that does feel daunting to many people. Whereas I guess you can be meditating out in nature, just walking, and it's something that we can just integrate into our lives rather than having to be like, okay, now I've got half an hour, I'm going to meditate and force myself into into this.
Yeah, and it's not seated meditation isn't for everybody, or it isn't for everybody all the time. Like we go through so many
Mm.
different like waves in our lives, and sometimes stillness just doesn't feel comfortable. So yeah, there's so many different ways to integrate it. And another lovely practice that I do is movement meditation, where I just put on some like music that allows me to feel, close my eyes, and just move. And again, that's another thing. It's like, what does your body want to do intuitively when you stop looking at it from like from outside or in a mirror, just like allowing yourself to move. That's another really powerful way to connect to your intuition as
Mm.
well.
I love that, actually. And that was one of the questions I was going to ask you about, actually, in terms of body. Like, how far were you disconnected from your body? And the more that you've kind of accessed it, how far did that play a part in kind of your self discovery and self expression?
Hugely. I was totally disconnected from my body, and to the point where when I started working with my somatic therapist, she was like, You're not in your legs and your feet. I don't know if you know that, but she would literally touch my legs and I would barely feel it. I was like, it's so
Mm.
strange. I was much, when you said I would kind of bring a lot of light, I did tend to escape a lot to the light a lot of the time. And so I was like
Mm.
always a bit, when we were talking about this, being a bit afraid of the darkness, that was definitely me and my experience at first. I was very much out there all the time. and meaning
That makes
disconnected
sense from the shadow of star.
yeah. And so it was a huge amount of work and exploration for me to feel safe in my body, actually, and for me to kind of come back to that and to recognize how much like wisdom and power we have within us. But it did take me a long time, and yoga really helped me do that. Movement meditation really helped me do that. And again, being out in nature in bare feet and doing things that just like reminded me that, you know, this is my physical body. It's okay to be here and it's safe. And lots of like self-touch and self-massage, like all the stuff that brings you back to that. It was definitely a huge part of my journey.
Yeah, gorgeous. More practical things there for women listening. That's really gorgeous. And that feels like a really good place to complete, unless there's anything else that you particularly want to share about. So yeah, let me ask you that first, actually. If there is anything that we feel that we haven't covered, or that you feel like is one really important thing for women to know about if they're listening to this episode.
Just, I mean, I think we've really covered everything I feel really passionate about, but it's just, you know, give yourself space and time and silence to get to know yourself. I think we mentioned my intuitive whispers cards, but like oracle cards
Yes.
are a really lovely daily practice as well that you can do. Just literally pull a card and it gives you a reminder to come back to yourself. And so just, you know, 5 minutes every day is enough to kind of bring back that reminder to yourself. So yeah, I think my hope is the wisdom that people get from this is just to remember that you have so much power and wisdom within you. So just give yourself the opportunity to listen and to connect back to it.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I was like, "Ooh, should we pull a card?"
Yes, we should pull a
Should we
card.
do it for our listeners?
Yeah. So I'm going to shuffle. You tell me when to stop, and then we'll
Okay.
pull a card.
Okay. Stop.
Okay, pulling the top card. One next step. And
Perfect.
shall I read it? Do we have time
Yes,
to do a little?
please. Yeah. Go
Okay,
on.
one next step. Card 36. One second, just finding it in my book, page 110.
What a number.
Yeah, a good number. One next step. What if what if you step into the unknown? What if you followed your instincts rather than following the crowd? So often we stop ourselves from taking action out of the fear that we might get it wrong or we are not clear on exactly where we are going. This moment is the time to stop procrastinating, listen to your gut feeling, and take the next step. It could be designing a mood board, starting your novel, getting out into nature, or whatever you desire. The first step is the hardest, so take a deep breath, face the direction you want to go, and step forward. The rest will follow. How to take one next step. Place one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. Close your eyes and take a few deep breaths, feeling your belly and chest rise and fall. In your mind's eye, picture yourself 5 years from now. Where are you? How do you feel? What are you doing and who are you with? With that vision, ask yourself, what is one practical step I can take to move toward that vision? Open your eyes and go for it.
That was so perfect for our conversation, wasn't it?
I felt that too. I was like, that kind of summarizes it all.
Yeah.
So good.
I love that. It's such a perfect witchy card. And yeah, what are you working on at the moment that people can find out more, and where can they find you? And we'll put all that in the show notes as well.
Thank you. So my website is maudehirst.co.uk. I work one-to-one in kind of a mentorship package. And then I also run a really beautiful members club for the mind, which is an online community where we gather to meditate, to have group sharing circles, and do some physical practices as well, some yoga and some movement meditation. So that's constantly running. And yeah, I'm hoping to do more oracle cards, and maybe a book is on the way, but that's all in the future. But for now, I'm growing a baby and I'm just in the process of creating life, but I'm still very much working with people. So if anybody wants to connect, please do reach out.
That's so gorgeous. And yeah, I so deeply want to congratulate you on this magical journey that you're in of growing a baby. So yeah, just gorgeous. Enjoy all of that. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. It's been beautiful.
Thank you for having me. It's been so lovely to meet you and to connect and talk about all the things I love most.
Yeah. Oh, I loved meeting Maude. She is so magical. And here are my key takeaways. We are all actresses in life. Most of us need to learn how to stop wearing masks and playing character roles and truly embrace our authentic selves. And we can begin this journey by tuning in to our intuitive whispers. The process of healing transformation requires 4 stages: listening to our intuition, clearing our limiting beliefs, rebuilding, which is consciously creating our true self, and action, taking aligned steps. Fear can come up in the journey of connecting to our intuitive whispers, and it's important to welcome and embrace that, moving through it rather than avoiding it. Darkness is part of the journey to ourselves. Tuning into our intuition is a daily practice. Connecting to our bodies and grounding into nature can really help us to hear ourselves, as can intuitive journaling or pulling oracle cards. It can be challenging to own who we are, especially as healer witches, because there is societal conditioning to overcome. That's just another layer of the onion to be healed and an invitation into the next spiral around the stages of healing transformation.